A myth won't save us from extinction, the Tellurian representative continued, her translucent skin flickering with bioluminescent patterns of distress. We should focus on evacuating what worlds we still can. The ancient Murian activated a second projection, this one showing detailed scans of an object at the edge of charted space. This defense platform was discovered by a mining expedition 30 years ago. Its metallurgical composition includes elements unknown to our science, and its power signature remained active after an estimated 20,000 years in deep space. The markings match those in records of human technology. Admiral Zelrak studied the projection, his tactical mind analyzing the structure's defensive capabilities. Even damaged and ancient, the platform's design principles suggested weapons systems far beyond Concordat technology. And you believe these humans could deploy such defenses across multiple systems? I believe they already have, the Murian replied. Our long-range probes detected energy signatures consistent with this technology surrounding the Sol system before all communications were lost. A thunderous impact rocked the station before anyone could respond. Emergency klaxons wailed as the lighting switched to crisis mode. Hegemony forces have broken through Sector 7. Commander Liz's voice came through the comms. They've adapted to our shield harmonics again. Estimate total barrier failure in 18 minutes. Zelrax turned to the council, no longer hiding his desperation. Make your decision now. Do we die holding our ground, or do we risk everything on a legend? The vote was not unanimous, but it was decisive. 3 hours later, as hegemony boarding parties breached the station's outer sectors, a small diplomatic vessel slipped away from the doomed battle station, its signature masked by the chaos of battle. Aboard the vessel, Ambassador Thrix reviewed the sparse files on humanity with growing unease. The records contained contradictions that defied explanation. Humans had apparently possessed interstellar capability for at least 15 centuries, yet had only revealed themselves to the galactic community briefly, 300 years ago. They had shared medical technologies that revolutionized Concordat healthcare, then refused to provide weapons when the first hegemony incursions began. Their ambassadors had spoken of universal responsibilities and evolutionary timetables before sealing their borders without explanation. Most disturbing were fragments of a conversation between the last human ambassador and a Concordat High Minister before diplomatic relations ended. What comes from between the stars cannot be fought with conventional weapons. When it returns, as it always does, every species must stand ready on their own merits. We cannot shortcut your development without drawing its attention to you. Ambassador, called the Quintal navigator from the bridge, interrupting her thoughts. We're approaching the coordinates, but long-range scans show only empty space. Thrix joined him on the bridge, her talons clicking against the metallic floor. The view screen showed nothing but distant stars and the black void between them. Their last hope appeared to be as substantial as the myths the Tellurian had dismissed. Run a full spectrum analysis, she ordered, refusing to accept failure. Check for gravitational anomalies, artificial radiation patterns, anything that could indicate cloaking technology. Detecting no. The navigator began, then froze as every system on the ship simultaneously powered down. The emergency lights failed to activate, leaving them in total darkness broken only by the distant starlight through the viewports. Through that faint illumination, Thrix watched as space itself seemed to ripple and fold before their vessel, revealing what had been hidden. A massive stellar engineering project that defied comprehension, stretching as far as they could see in every direction. A calm voice speaking perfect galactic standard came through their dead communication system. Concordat vessel, you have entered restricted space. State your purpose. Thrix stepped forward on shaking legs, feeling the weight of her civilization's survival on her shoulders. My name is Ambassador Thrix of the Galactic Concordat. We seek humanity's aid against an enemy that threatens to extinguish all sentient life. The silence that followed seemed to stretch for eternity. The Dreadnought fleet has been preparing for this moment for generations, Admiral Vask said, her voice carrying a weight of history that made Thrix's feathers instinctively flatten. "We've monitored the hegemony's advance since they first emerged from the Perseus void. If you knew their threat, why did you abandon us?" demanded the Tellurian representative, her skin flashing angry patterns of red and gold. "Billions of lives could have been saved with your intervention." Vasquez's expression remained impassive, but her eyes reflected something deeper, perhaps regret or determination. She gestured to a junior officer who activated a holographic display in the center of the observation deck. "This is Earth, 300 years ago," she said as images appeared showing devastated cities, massive craters where population centers once stood, and strange shadow-like distortions moving across landscapes. "We nearly destroyed ourselves developing the technologies you now see around you." The display shifted to show massive construction projects, entire continents reorganized for production, asteroid belts harvested for resources. "For 12 generations, every human has contributed to building our defenses and understanding the true enemy," Vasquez continued. "The hegemony is merely a symptom of a greater threat, one that humanity faced alone, because we couldn't risk accelerating your technological development without drawing its attention to the wider galactic community." The Quintal navigator's gelatinous form rippled with confusion. "You claim some threat exists greater than the force that has consumed half the known galaxy." Instead of answering directly, Vasquez led them deeper into the station. They passed laboratories where scientists of varying human ethnicities worked on technologies that seemed to bend light in impossible ways. In manufacturing bays, robotic systems assembled components that appeared to exist partially outside normal space, their edges blurring when viewed directly. They entered a secure chamber where a single artifact rested on a pedestal, a fragment of blackened material that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. "This is all that remained of the Jakarta array after the first incursion," Vasquez explained. "A defense platform housing 6 million souls. The entities we call the Abyssal Ones didn't just destroy it. They erased it from reality, leaving only this fragment as evidence it ever existed." Thrix approached the pedestal cautiously. Despite its small size, the object felt massive somehow, as though it possessed gravity beyond its physical dimensions. "What are these Abyssal Ones?" "Predators that feed on advanced civilizations," Vasquez replied. "They exist partially outside conventional spacetime, drawn to specific energy signatures produced by technologies beyond a certain threshold. The hegemony encountered them at the galaxy's edge and has been running ever since, consuming everything in their path to build sufficient neural mass to process what they witnessed." The delegation fell silent as the implications became clear. The Tellurian's bioluminescence dimmed to a faint glow. "Then we've been fighting the wrong enemy." Vasquez nodded. "And now that we're revealing ourselves to save you, we're placing every sentient species on the same metaphysical radar. The Dreadnoughts aren't just warships. They're specialized platforms designed to fight across multiple dimensional planes simultaneously." As if to emphasize her point, a gentle vibration ran through the station. On a nearby monitor, a massive vessel detached from its construction cradle, its hull covered with intricate patterns that seemed to shift when not directly observed. "The UEA's _Defiance_ has just been activated," Vasquez said, watching the ship with quiet pride. "One of 300 dreadnoughts that will deploy within the next 72 hours. Thrix felt her species' natural caution warring with desperate hope. Can these vessels truly defeat both the hegemony and these Abyssal Ones? For the first time, Vasquez's professional demeanor cracked slightly, revealing a fierce determination beneath. "Ambassador, humanity has spent 3 centuries preparing not just to fight this war, but to win it. Tomorrow, we'll show you how." The engagement over Helios Prime continued as Captain Chen monitored the battlefield from the Dreadnoughts Command Center. Holographic displays showed hegemony ships attempting to adapt to human attack patterns, their biomechanical vessels reconfiguring in real time. "They're establishing a new neural link structure," reported Lieutenant Nakamura, her hands moving through the tactical interface. attempting to bypass the severed command nodes. Chen nodded, unsurprised. The hegemony's adaptability is impressive. Implement counter-pattern Alpha 7. Throughout the massive vessel, specialized systems recalibrated, shifting the Dreadnoughts' dimensional signature just enough to disrupt the enemy's targeting algorithms. Non-essential compartments reconfigured, changing the ship's mass distribution and energy profile. To the hegemony sensors, the human vessel seemed to flicker in and out of conventional reality. In a secondary command post, a mixed team of human officers and Concordat observers watched the battle unfold. Ambassador Thrix struggled to comprehend the tactics being employed. The human ship wasn't just fighting in physical space, but seemed to be manipulating the underlying fabric of reality itself. The dimensional phasing is our primary advantage, explained Commander Reese Jackson, noting her confusion. The hegemony exists primarily in standard spacetime, while the abyssals operate across multiple dimensional planes. Our dreadnoughts were designed to fight in both theaters simultaneously. A Murian scientist observed the tactical display with crystalline appendages vibrating in agitation. These weapons violate conservation of energy principles. You're extracting power from somewhere else. Jackson's expression remained neutral, but his eyes betrayed concern. The less you know about that, the safer your species will be. On the main bridge, Captain Chen received a priority communication from Admiral Vasquez. Status report, Captain. Hegemony forces are withdrawing from the Helios system. Chen responded. 53% of their command structure has been neutralized without civilian casualties. 39% of their vessels have initiated self-preservation protocols and are abandoning combat configuration. Excellent work, Vasquez replied. Our simultaneous strikes across 50 systems are producing similar results. The hegemony's hive mind is experiencing unprecedented disruption. Chen studied the tactical overlay showing the broader strategic situation. Admiral, sensors are detecting unusual energy fluctuations at the edge of the system. Pattern matches abyssal precursor signatures. A moment of tense silence followed. As expected, Vasquez finally said, "Our intervention has drawn their attention. Implement watchdog protocols and maintain your position. The _Unity_ will rendezvous with your battle group in 6 hours to begin Phase 2. As the communication ended, Chen turned to her executive officer. Deploy sensor drones to establish a perimeter. I want early detection of any dimensional anomalies. Below decks, human engineers worked alongside Concordat technical specialists to analyze captured hegemony technology. Dr. Eliza Chen, the captain's sister and the fleet's leading xenobiologist, carefully dissected a section of biomechanical material while a Quintal scientist observed. The neural pathways show signs of external modification, she noted, adjusting her instruments. These growth patterns aren't natural evolution. They've been deliberately altered to process information in specific ways. The Quintal's gelatinous form rippled with surprise. You're suggesting the hegemony was engineered. Before she could respond, the laboratory's alert system activated. The sample under examination had begun emitting a faint energy signature that matched no known pattern in the ship's database. Security team to Xenobiology Lab 3. Dr. Chen called, backing away from the workstation. Possible dimensional contamination detected. Throughout the Dreadnought, similar alerts began triggering as captured hegemony technology spontaneously activated. Captain Chen received multiple reports simultaneously. All personnel, implement quarantine procedures, she ordered, her voice steady despite the escalating crisis. This isn't random activation. It's a coordinated response. On the tactical display, the energy fluctuations at the system's edge intensified. Something was emerging from the dimensional boundary, something that had been waiting for humanity to reveal itself. First contact protocol had succeeded against the hegemony, but the real enemy had just arrived. A refugee fleet fleeing cosmic predators, the Murian scientist repeated, her crystalline form refracting light in patterns that conveyed deep distress. This changes everything we thought we knew about the war. The diplomatic reception had devolved into chaos following Lieutenant Nakamura's unauthorized revelation. Concordat representatives huddled in shocked groups while human security personnel established a perimeter around the sensitive historical data that had been displayed. Commander Jackson pulled Nakamura aside, his voice low but intense. "That information was classified for a reason, Lieutenant. You've just accelerated our timeline considerably. They deserve to know what they're truly facing," she responded, unapologetic despite the breach of protocol. "How can we expect them to fight alongside us if we're keeping them in the dark?" Their argument was interrupted by an emergency alert. Throughout the station, displays activated simultaneously showing real-time footage from the Helios system. The Dreadnought _Indomitable_ was engaging with something that defied conventional perception. A spatial distortion that seemed to bend light around it, visible only by the stars that disappeared behind its shifting outline. "Abyssal manifestation," Jackson breathed, immediately moving toward the command center with Nakamura close behind. They found Admiral Vasquez already coordinating the response, her calm demeanor belying the gravity of the situation. "Deploy quantum resonators to these coordinates," she ordered. "Establish a containment perimeter and evacuate all civilian vessels." The gathered diplomats watched in stunned silence as human operators executed complex defensive protocols with practiced efficiency. This wasn't their first encounter with these entities. "What are we seeing?" Ambassador Thrix asked, her vocal sacs vibrating with tension. "An abyssal scout," Nakamura explained, her earlier insubordination apparently forgotten in a crisis. "They send smaller manifestations ahead of their primary entities to assess defensive capabilities." On the display, the _Indomitable_ shifted its configuration, extending arrays that emitted coherent energy patterns, unlike any weapon the Concordat representatives had witnessed. The beam didn't strike the distortion directly but instead established a geometric pattern around it, creating a cage of intersecting energy planes. "Dimensional lock establish," reported a communications officer. "Entity contained at 67% efficiency and holding." Vasquez turned to address the assembled representatives, her expression grave. "This is what humanity has been preparing to fight for 3 centuries. The hegemony encountered them first and has been running ever since, consuming everything in their path to build processing capacity." The Tellurian minister stepped forward, her bioluminescence pulsing with urgent patterns. "If the hegemony is fleeing these abyssals, then why have they fought us so aggressively? Why not simply explain and seek alliance?" "Because they can't," came a new voice. Dr. Eliza Chen entered the command center, exhaustion evident in her movements after 72 hours of continuous research. "The hegemony isn't malevolent. It's infected." She transferred her findings to the main display, showing complex molecular structures from hegemony tissue samples. Their entire neural network has been compromised at the cellular level. The original hegemony species encountered the abyssals 28 years ago and were partially assimilated. What we've been fighting isn't a conquering empire. It's a victim trying to build enough neural complexity to break free from abyssal control. The revelation sent shockwaves through the assembled delegates. The enemy they had been fighting for decades was itself a casualty of a greater threat. Jackson stepped forward, military pragmatism taking precedence over diplomatic niceties. "This changes our strategic approach. We need to extract the original hegemony consciousness before we can effectively combat the abyssals." Vasquez nodded in agreement. "Captain Rahman is already assembling a strike team for extraction. But we'll need Concordat assistance. Your species have fought the hegemony for years and understand their systems better than we do." Ambassador Thrix looked around at her fellow representatives, seeing the same realization dawn across species. The war they had been losing wasn't the real war at all. It had merely been the opening skirmish in a conflict beyond their comprehension. "The Concordat will provide whatever assistance we can," she said, speaking for all present. "But tell us honestly, Admiral, can these abyssals be defeated?" Vasquez's eyes met hers directly. "They must be, Ambassador, because if they're not, there won't be a galaxy left to save. Captain Ramen led his strike team through the pulsing organic corridors of the hegemony consciousness nexus, each step carefully placed to avoid triggering the structure's neural sensors. The team moved like shadows, their specialized stealth suits bending light around them and dampening their biosignatures. The nexus itself seemed alive, walls undulating with slow peristaltic movements, circulating data and energy throughout the massive biological computer. "Dimensional readings are spiking," whispered Cora, the Peltian commando who had initially doubted the mission. Her specialized sensor array was calibrated to detect the subtle energy signatures Dr. Chen had identified as indicators of abyssal contamination. "The corruption is stronger as we move inward." Rama nodded, consulting the three-dimensional map projected onto his tactical visor. The uncorrupted core should be 200 meters ahead, behind the primary neural cluster. The mixed species team had trained together for only 72 hours before deployment, but necessity had forged them into a cohesive unit. Each member brought unique abilities crucial to the mission. A Murian technician who could interface with crystalline information systems, a Tellurian scout whose bioluminescence could be controlled to mimic hegemony communication patterns, and a specially modified human-designed AI that could translate the complex biochemical language of the hive mind. They reached a junction where neural pathways converged from multiple directions. The organic walls here pulsed with more rapid rhythms, transmitting data at speeds that made the surrounding tissue glow with bioluminescent activity. "This is a primary thought center," the AI interpreter indicated through their shared comm system, similar to a regional processing hub in a distributed network. The Murian technician extended a crystalline appendage, carefully interfacing with a neural node. "I'm detecting two distinct information patterns," he reported. "One is organized with mathematical precision, likely the original hegemony consciousness. The other is chaotic, operating on principles I cannot comprehend. They're engaged in a continuous information war." Ramen checked the mission clock. They had 18 minutes before the diversionary attack by the human fleet ended, leaving them without cover. "Can you isolate the original consciousness patterns?" "Attempting now," the Murian replied, his crystalline structure vibrating with effort as he interfaced more deeply with the neural network. "The original patterns are being systematically overwritten, but they're fighting back through recursive algorithmic loops. They're aware of our presence." The surrounding tissue suddenly pulsed with increased activity, neural pathways lighting up around them. "We've been detected," Cora warned, weapons ready. Instead of triggering defenses, however, the network began reconfiguring itself, opening a pathway deeper into the structure. The AI interpreter processed the biochemical signals rapidly. "This is unexpected," it reported. "The original hegemony consciousness is creating a safe route for us. It's fighting the corruption to help us reach the core." Ramen made a quick tactical assessment. "It could be a trap by the abyssal influence." "I don't believe so," the Murian countered. "The mathematical patterns are consistent with desperate self-preservation, not deception. They're sacrificing peripheral consciousness nodes to maintain this pathway." With time running short, Ramen made his decision. "We follow the path, maintain defensive formation, and be prepared to implement emergency extraction if necessary." The team advanced through the newly formed corridor, witnessing the internal struggle of the hegemony mind made physical. In some sections, tissue had blackened and died as the original consciousness destroyed its own neural pathways to prevent abyssal spread. In others, strange crystalline growths that matched no known biological pattern had formed, gleaming with an unnatural light that hurt the eyes if viewed directly. They finally reached a sealed chamber at the Nexus core. Unlike the organic structure of the surrounding facility, this room was protected by technology recognizably similar to early human quantum shielding, evidence of knowledge the hegemony had gained during their first abyssal encounter. "The uncorrupted consciousness core is inside," the AI confirmed. "But the corruption is converging on our position. We have 7 minutes to extract it before we're overwhelmed. Ramen placed the specialized containment device developed by Dr. Chen at the chamber entrance. Begin the extraction sequence. Everyone else, defensive positions. We're taking the hegemony home. Commander Ariang studied the holographic battle simulation with intense focus, noting every point where the mixed species combat teams faltered against the simulated abyssal entity. Despite 3 weeks of intensive training, coordination remained a critical issue. Species with fundamentally different sensory systems struggled to communicate battlefield information effectively, while divergent evolutionary paths created incompatible tactical instincts. "Reset the simulation," she ordered, suppressing her frustration. "This time, I want Pelsian reconnaissance units to maintain constant communication with Murian sensor teams. Humans should focus on dimension anchoring roles rather than direct engagement." As the teams repositioned, Angie noticed the hegemony tactical symbiote hovering at the edge of the training area. The amorphous being had volunteered for the program, despite facing open hostility from many Concordat participants. Its bioelectric field fluctuated in patterns that Aang had learned to recognize as anxiety. The simulation commenced again, proceeding further than previous attempts before collapsing into chaos when a simulated abyssal shifted its dimensional frequency. "Enough," Aang called, ending the exercise. The assembled warriors, representing 12 different species, showed various signs of exhaustion and frustration. "Dismissed for recovery period. We reconvene in 4 hours." As the teams dispersed, Aang approached the hegemony symbiote, which had already begun retreating from the training area. "You didn't participate in this exercise," she noted, maintaining a neutral tone. The symbiote's external membrane rippled in a communication pattern. "My presence causes distress to the Concordat personnel. Optimal team efficiency is reduced by 23.7% when I am included." Aang nodded, understanding the symbiote's mathematical approach to emotional dynamics. "They fear what they don't understand. And after 30 years of war, understanding takes time." "Time is the resource we lack most critically," the symbiote responded. Its field projected a simplified data visualization showing abyssal manifestation rates increasing exponentially across monitored sectors. Aang studied the projection with growing concern. The symbiote was right. Their training timeline was becoming increasingly unrealistic as abyssal incursions accelerated. They needed a breakthrough. "You perceive dimensional shifts differently than other species," she said thoughtfully. "How does an abyssal manifestation appear from your perspective?" The symbiote pulsed with an emotion Aang couldn't identify. "I cannot adequately translate the perception. Your language lacks necessary conceptual frameworks." "Then show me directly," Aang suggested. "A limited symbiotic connection, just enough to share sensory information." The being recoiled slightly, its field contracting with surprise. "Such connection is intimate. It would be considered invasive by human standards." "We're beyond standard protocols," Aang replied firmly. "If there's knowledge that can help us fight more effectively, we need to access it, regardless of conventional boundaries." After a moment of hesitation, the symbiote extended a delicate tendril toward Aang's outstretched hand. Where they connected, a bioelectric field interface formed, creating a limited neural bridge. Aang gasped as foreign perceptions flooded her consciousness, the world suddenly visible across multiple dimensional planes simultaneously, energy patterns revealing themselves as complex mathematical structures flowing through apparently solid matter. When the connection broke after mere seconds, Aang staggered backward, her mind reeling from the experience. "That's how you perceive reality all the time." "A simplified version," the symbiote acknowledged. "The full perception would overwhelm human neural architecture." Aang's tactical mind was already processing the implications. "You can see the dimensional weak points in abyssal entities, the places where their structure intersects with our reality most vulnerably." "Yes, but I cannot effectively communicate this information in real time during combat scenarios." A plan began forming in Aang's mind. "You don't need to communicate it. You need to share it directly, just as you did with me. She activated her comm unit. This is Commander Aang. I need the crystalline weapons specialist in Training Room 3 immediately. When the Concordat warrior arrived, a veteran who had lost his entire clan to a hegemony harvesting operation, Aang explained her unprecedented proposal. Initial resistance was fierce, as expected, but the strategic logic eventually prevailed over emotional history. 26 hours later, an emergency alert sounded throughout the station. An abyssal incursion had breached defenses at a critical research outpost. With no time for further training, Aang deployed her experimental team, including the unlikely partnership of the hegemony symbiote and crystalline specialist, now linked in partial symbiosis that allowed shared sensory perception. The strike vessel approached the dimensional anomaly cautiously, its sensors struggling to maintain lock on the shifting entity. On the command deck, the crystalline specialist extended appendages connected to the hegemony symbiote, their combined consciousness perceiving what no individual species could see, the precise points where the abyssal structure was vulnerable. Target coordinates transmitting to weapons control. The specialist communicated, his crystalline voice harmonizing with the symbiote's bioelectric pulses in an eerie duet. Captain Raman's vessel fired precisely calibrated energy beams that struck the entity at its dimensional weak points. For the first time in the new conflict, an abyssal manifestation was successfully repelled with minimal collateral damage. As the creature retreated across the dimensional barrier, Aang received the after-action report with cautious optimism. The unique partnership had succeeded where conventional approaches had failed, proving that unity might indeed be their only hope for survival. The quantum resonators activated simultaneously across 27 stellar positions, their harmonized frequencies creating a complex dimensional interference pattern designed to destabilize abyssal manifestations. On the bridge of the strike vessel _Defiance _, Captain Raman monitored the operation's progress with grim determination. His ship led a fleet of 30 vessels, representing every allied species, on a direct course toward the swirling dimensional rupture near the galactic core. Resonator network at 76% synchronization, reported his executive officer, the displays showing energy patterns converging across light years of space. Dimensional barrier fluctuations increasing at the target site. Raman studied the tactical overlay, noting the positions of the Allied defensive fleets engaging smaller abyssal entities throughout surrounding systems. Admiral Vasquez had deployed every available dreadnought to protect the resonator network and civilian worlds, leaving Raman's strike force as the only available unit for the direct insertion mission. In the ship's specialized laboratory, Dr. Chen made final adjustments to the experimental weapon, a hybrid device incorporating both human quantum technology and hegemony neural interface systems. The captured consciousness core extracted from the hegemony nexus had provided crucial insights into abyssal dimensional topology, allowing for unprecedented targeting precision. The weapon is ready, Chen confirmed via comlink, fatigue evident in her voice after days without rest. But I must emphasize again that our models cannot predict all possible outcomes. The energies we're manipulating exist partially outside conventional physics. Understood, Doctor, Raman replied. All personnel, secure for dimensional transition in 3 minutes. Throughout the vessel, mixed species crews completed final preparations. The unprecedented mission had drawn volunteers from every allied world, warriors who had once fought each other now united against an existential threat. Among them, the hegemony symbiote and crystalline specialist moved in perfect synchronization, their partial symbiosis now refined to enable seamless coordination without communication delays. Strike team, final systems check, Raman ordered as the ship approached the rupture's event horizon. The swirling dimensional tear grew in the viewports, its edges shifting with colors that seemed to exist beyond the visible spectrum. Once we cross the threshold, communications with the fleet will be severed. We'll be operating on pre-established protocols only. His tactical officer, a Peltian whose natural spatial awareness made her exceptionally suited for multidimensional navigation, configured the final approach vector. Dimensional transition calculations complete. Optimal insertion point identified. Raman took a moment to address the crew. Every species in this galaxy has fought its own battles throughout history. Today, we fight as one. Our mission is simple. Deliver the weapon to the apex manifestation point and return. The future of all sentient life depends on our success. The _Defiance_ led the strike fleet into the rupture, energy cascading across specialized shielding designed to maintain structural integrity across dimensional boundaries. The transition felt like reality itself becoming fluid, solid matter momentarily existing in multiple states simultaneously. Several crew members experienced sensory distortions, seeing through bulkheads, perceiving time non-linearly, feeling the thoughts of others as tangible objects. When stability returned, they found themselves in a realm that defied description. What appeared as empty space was alive with energy structures that resembled vast neural networks spanning impossible distances. At the center of this dimensional nexus, a concentration of darkness, deeper than the absence of light, pulsed with malevolent awareness. The abyssal apex, the hegemony symbiote identified, its bioelectric field fluctuating with primal fear. The consciousness that directs all lesser manifestations. Raman ordered the fleet into defensive formation as sensor data indicated multiple entities converging on their position. Begin weapon deployment sequence. All vessels, maintain the perimeter until activation is complete. The battle erupted across dimensional planes simultaneously. Conventional weapons proved largely ineffective, passing through abyssal entities without impact, while specialized quantum-locked systems managed only temporary disruptions. 3 escort vessels were lost in the initial engagement, their matter seemingly unraveled at the molecular level by contact with abyssal energy patterns. On the _Defiance_, Dr. Chen initiated the weapon's activation sequence, the device drawing power directly from the ship's dimensional drive core. Quantum resonance building, she reported. Alignment with Galactic network at 43% and rising. Raman watched as his fleet fought with desperate courage against entities that seemed to bend reality itself. The hegemony symbiote and crystalline specialist coordinated defensive countermeasures, identifying dimensional weaknesses that other systems couldn't detect. Their partnership had evolved beyond tactical necessity into something unprecedented, a new form of consciousness that existed between species. Weapon activation in 60 seconds, Chen announced as reality around them became increasingly unstable. The apex entity had detected their presence and was bringing its full awareness to bear on the intrusion. Raman transmitted a final message to his fleet. Hold position at all costs. Whatever happens, the weapon must activate. As the countdown reached 0, the experimental device connected to the Galactic resonator network, creating a cascading dimensional frequency that propagated outward through the rupture. The apex entity reacted immediately, its vast consciousness contracting toward the strike fleet. For the crew of the _Defiance_, time itself seemed to stop as 2 incomprehensible forces collided in a realm beyond human understanding. 1 year after the Battle of the Core, Illuminar had been transformed from a war-ravaged world into a symbol of unprecedented cooperation. The planet's reconstruction incorporated environmental zones for every allied species, with architecture that blended diverse cultural elements into harmonious new forms. In the central plaza, a monument crafted from materials contributed by 23 different worlds commemorated those lost in the conflict, not as separate casualties of individual species, but as united defenders of all sentient life. Admiral Vasquez stood at the observation window of the newly completed Galactic Council chamber, watching vessels from dozens of worlds moving through Illuminar's orbital lanes. Ships that would have fired upon each other without hesitation 2 years earlier now docked side by side, exchanging personnel, knowledge, and resources. "Quite a view," remarked Captain Raman as he joined her. The scar across his face, a reminder of his expedition into the dimensional rupture, had healed into an intricate pattern that seemed to shift slightly when viewed from different angles. Only 3 of his original 30 ships had returned from the mission, but their success had saved countless worlds. Worth fighting for, Vasquez agreed, turning to face the council chamber where representatives were gathering for the formal ratification of the Terran Accords. How are the new training protocols progressing? Raman smiled slightly. Commander Aang has transformed the Academy curriculum completely. The cadets are learning to perceive reality through each other's sensory systems, humans experiencing crystalline information processing, Peltians sharing avian spatial awareness. It's changing how they approach problem-solving fundamentally. Below them in the plaza, Dr. Chen led a procession of scientists toward the newly completed Dimensional Observatory. The massive installation combined technologies from all member species into something greater than any could have achieved alone. A facility designed to study the multiverse without attracting its predators. The modified hegemony consciousness has been fully integrated into the early warning network, Raman continued. They're detecting dimensional fluctuations months before manifestation, giving us time to implement preventative measures rather than reactive defenses. Vasquez nodded thoughtfully. And the symbiote partnerships? Expanding beyond military applications, Raman replied. The techniques developed by the hegemony symbiote and crystalline specialist have inspired medical breakthroughs, allowing cross-species organ transplantation and neural interface systems that translate between incompatible biological architectures. Their conversation was interrupted by Ambassador Thrix, her once dulled feathers now restored to their iridescent glory. Admiral, Captain, the Council is ready to begin the ratification ceremony. They followed her into the chamber where representatives from across the galaxy had assembled. The Terran Accords lay displayed on a central pedestal, not as a traditional document, but as a crystalline matrix holding the agreement in multiple formats simultaneously. Digital code, biochemical markers, quantum entanglement patterns, and traditional text, making it accessible to every signatory species regardless of their sensory apparatus. As the formal proceedings began, Vasquez found herself standing beside the Murian scientist whose ancient records had first led the Concordat to seek Earth's help. Did you anticipate this outcome when you advocated contacting humans? Vasquez asked quietly. The Murian's crystalline surface rippled with what might have been amusement. I hoped for survival. This, he gestured to the diverse gathering, exceeds all possible projections. The first article of the Accords established the Dimensional Regulatory Framework, a carefully balanced approach to technological development designed to prevent future abyssal incursions while allowing scientific progress to continue. Human dreadnoughts, once symbols of terrifying military power, were being recommissioned as exploration vessels and defensive platforms protecting key dimensional boundaries. The second article created the Galactic Defense Force, a unified military organization with mixed species crews as standard throughout the fleet. The first graduating class of the Academy stood at attention along the chamber's perimeter, their diverse forms wearing uniforms that accommodated physiological differences while symbolizing their shared purpose. As the ratification approached unanimous approval, Vasquez observed the hegemony consciousness representative, a specialized interface unit that allowed the distributed intelligence to participate in physical gatherings. Once considered the galaxy's greatest threat, the partially restored hegemony now served as the Alliance's dimensional early warning system, their unique perceptual abilities providing crucial data on subspace activities. When the formal ceremony concluded, Vasquez found a moment of solitude on a balcony overlooking the central plaza. Night was falling, and inhabitants from dozens of worlds moved through illuminated walkways below. Refugees who had found new homes, scientists collaborating across species boundaries, children from different evolutionary paths playing together without concern for their physical differences. Ambassador Thrix joined her, looking out over the scene. My ancestors would never have believed this possible, she said softly. Did you know this would happen when you answered our call? Vasquez smiled slightly, watching a young Peltian child tentatively approaching the human family, curious about their strange appearance. No, but humanity always believed we weren't meant to face the darkness alone. She gestured toward the academy, where the next generation of officers trained together. We just needed the right allies. As stars appeared in Illuminar's evening sky, they seemed to promise opportunity rather than threat. A galaxy no longer divided by ancient conflicts or cowering in fear of cosmic predators, but united in its remarkable diversity, ready to defend what they had built together. The war that had nearly consumed them all had ultimately forged something unprecedented. A civilization greater than the sum of its parts, standing together against whatever the universe might bring next.